Erica, you can't be serious. Emily's voice cut through the kitchen like a knife. I looked up from the sink, water still running over my hands. What now, Emily? You think you can just waltz back in here and take over everything? Mom and Dad don't need your help. Emily's eyes were like daggers, her corporate attire as sharp as her words. Really? Because they seem to appreciate the help, I replied, turning off the faucet and drying my hands. And it's not like you've been around much. Emily scoffed, crossing her arms. I have a busy career, Erica. Not all of us can afford to play with cakes all day. I felt my cheeks flush. It's not playing. I run a successful business, Emily. Just because I didn't follow your corporate path doesn't mean I'm any less capable. Girls, please. Mom's voice trembled as she entered the kitchen. This is not the time for arguments. Dad followed closely behind, his steps slower than they used to be. Your mother's right. We need to decide what to do about the house. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm brewing inside me. That's why I'm here. I want to help you both, whatever you decide. Emily rolled her eyes. Help? By moving back in? How convenient for you. Convenient? You think moving back to our childhood home at 34 is convenient? I shot back, my voice rising. I'm here because I care about Mom and Dad, not because it's easy. Dad raised his hand. Enough. We need to have a family discussion, not a shouting match. We all sat at the worn dining table, the same one we had shared countless meals around. The tension in the room was palpable. We've been thinking, Mom started, her voice soft but firm. The house is too much for us to manage. We're considering selling it and moving to something smaller. And you think Erica can handle this? Emily's skepticism was clear. Yes, we do, Dad said, looking directly at her. Erica has always been good with her hands, and she's proven herself with her business. Emily's eyes narrowed. So, what's the plan, Erica? You just take over everything. No, Emily. The plan is to help Mom and Dad. If that means moving back in for a while, then so be it, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Emily leaned back, a smirk playing on her lips. Well, good luck with that. The conversation ended with no resolution, just more tension. As I helped Mom clear the table, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off with Emily. She had always been competitive, but this was different. There was something she wasn't telling us. Later that evening, as I settled into my old bedroom, I overheard Emily talking to Arthur on the phone. No, Arthur. We can't let her stay. We need that apartment. Yes, I know. We'll figure it out. I felt a chill run down my spine. Emily and Arthur needed the apartment? Why? They both had high-paying jobs. What was going on? The next morning, I decided to confront Emily. I found her in the living room, scrolling through her phone. Emily, we need to talk. She looked up, annoyed. About what? About why you and Arthur need this apartment so badly, I said, crossing my arms. Emily's face turned pale. That's none of your business. It is if it affects Mom and Dad, I insisted. She stood up, her eyes flashing with anger. You don't know what you're talking about, Erica. Just stay out of it. I watched her storm out of the room, my mind racing. There was definitely more to this story, and I was determined to find out what it was. For Mom and Dad's sake, and maybe for my own. As the days passed, I noticed more odd behavior from Emily and Arthur. They were secretive, always whispering in corners or taking phone calls outside. My suspicions grew, and I knew I had to dig deeper. One evening, as we all sat down for dinner, Emily made an announcement. Arthur and I have decided to move in here temporarily. We need to save some money. My heart skipped a beat. Save money? For what? Emily hesitated, then said, We have some financial issues. It's just temporary. Dad looked concerned. What kind of issues, Emily? She avoided his gaze. Just some debts we need to pay off. It's nothing serious. I knew she was lying, and I knew I had to find out the truth. For now I played along, but my resolve was set. This was far from over. I was in the middle of decorating a 3-tier wedding cake when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Thomas. Hey, love. How's everything at home? He asked. Complicated. I typed back. Emily and Arthur are moving in, supposedly to save money. Something's off. Want me to come over tonight? He replied. Yes, please. I could use the support. I set my phone down and focused on piping delicate roses on the cake. The repetitive motion calmed my nerves, but my mind kept drifting back to Emily and Arthur. They had always seemed like the golden couple, but now I was starting to see cracks in their facade. Later that evening, Thomas arrived just as we were finishing dinner. His presence was like a breath of fresh air. He greeted my parents warmly and gave me a reassuring smile. Good to see you, Thomas, Dad said, patting him on the back. How's the art world treating you? Busy as always, Mr. Johnson, Thomas replied with a grin. But I wouldn't have it any other way. Emily and Arthur were noticeably quiet, their eyes darting between Thomas and me. I could tell they were uneasy, and it only fueled my suspicions. After dinner, Thomas and I retreated to the living room. So, what's the latest? He asked, keeping his voice low. Emily and Arthur claim they need to save money, I whispered. But I overheard Emily talking about debts. Something's not adding up. Thomas frowned. Debts? That doesn't sound like them. I know. And they didn't even have a wedding ceremony. Emily always dreamed of a big, fancy wedding. It's just strange. Thomas nodded thoughtfully. We need to find out what's really going on. Just then, Emily walked in, her expression guarded. What are you two whispering about? Just catching up, I said casually. Thomas was asking how things are going. Emily's eyes narrowed. Well, if you're so curious, why don't you ask me directly? All right, I said, standing up. What's really going on, Emily? Why do you and Arthur need to move in here? Emily's face flushed with anger. I told you, it's none of your business. It is my business if it affects Mom and Dad, I insisted. Arthur appeared in the doorway, looking tense. Emily, let's go. We don't need to explain ourselves. Thomas stepped forward. Maybe you should. Erica's just trying to help. Emily glared at him. Stay out of this, Thomas. He's right, I said firmly. We deserve to know the truth. Emily's eyes filled with tears, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Fine, she said, her voice shaking. Arthur and I have some debts. We made some bad investments, and now we're in over our heads. Arthur looked defeated. We didn't want to worry anyone, but we need time to get back on our feet. I felt a mix of anger and pity. Why didn't you just ask for help? Emily wiped her eyes. Because we're supposed to have it all together. We're supposed to be the successful ones. Thomas put a hand on my shoulder. Everyone makes mistakes, Emily. But hiding it only makes things worse. Emily looked at me, her expression softening. I'm sorry, Erica. We didn't mean to drag you into this. I took a deep breath. It's not just about me. It's about Mom and Dad. They need to know what's going on. Emily nodded. You're right. We'll tell them everything. As we gathered in the living room, Emily and Arthur explained their situation to our parents. Mom looked heartbroken, and Dad seemed lost in thought. We'll figure this out, Dad finally said. But you need to be honest with us from now on. Emily and Arthur agreed, and the tension in the room eased slightly. But I knew this was just the beginning. There were still so many unanswered questions, and I was determined to get to the bottom of it. Later, as Thomas and I sat on the porch, he took my hand. You handled that well. Thanks, I said, leaning against him. But I have a feeling things are going to get a lot more complicated. Thomas squeezed my hand. Whatever happens, we'll face it together. I looked out at the darkening sky, feeling a mix of uncertainty and resolve. This was far from over, and I was ready for whatever came next. I was in the middle of packing my things when Emily and Arthur arrived at the house. They didn't bother knocking, just walked right in like they owned the place. I could hear their voices echoing down the hallway as they made their way to the living room. Erica, we need to talk, Emily said, her tone as cold as ever. I took a deep breath and walked out to meet them. Thomas was there too, standing by the door with a concerned look on his face. "What is it now, Emily?" I asked, crossing my arms. "We've decided that it's best if you move out," Arthur said, trying to sound authoritative but failing miserably. I raised an eyebrow. "And why is that?" Emily stepped forward, her eyes blazing. "Because we need the apartment. You can find somewhere else to live." I felt a surge of anger. "This is Mom and Dad's house, Emily. You don't get to make that decision. We've already talked to them," Arthur said, his voice shaking slightly. "They agree it's for the best." I looked at Thomas, who gave me a nod of encouragement. "Fine," I said, my voice steady. "I'll move out. But don't think for a second that I'm going to let you push me around." Emily smirked. "Good. The sooner you're gone, the better." I turned to Thomas. "Let's go. We have some packing to do." As we walked back to my room, Thomas squeezed my hand. "Are you sure about this?" "Yes," I said, my voice firm. "I'm not going to let them bully me. Besides, I have a feeling this is just the beginning." The next few days were a whirlwind of packing and moving. Thomas helped me find a small apartment nearby, and we spent hours getting everything set up. Despite the chaos, having him by my side made everything more bearable. One evening, as we were unpacking the last of the boxes, my phone rang. It was Mom. "Erica, can you come over? We need to talk," she said, her voice sounding strained. "Of course, Mom. I'll be there soon," I replied, feeling a knot form in my stomach. When I arrived at the house, Emily and Arthur were already there, looking smug as ever. Mom and Dad were sitting on the couch, looking worried. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. "Emily and Arthur have something to tell you," Mom said, glancing nervously at them. Emily stood up, her expression serious. "We need you to pay rent and bills for the apartment. It's only fair since you're the one who moved out." I stared at her in disbelief. "Are you kidding me? You forced me out, and now you want me to pay for it." "It's only temporary," Arthur added quickly. "Just until we get back on our feet." I felt my anger rising. "No. If you want to live here, you pay your way." Emily's face turned red. "You can't do this to us, Erica. We're family. Family doesn't treat each other like this." I shot back. "You made your bed, now lie in it." The room fell silent, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Finally, Dad spoke up. "Erica's right. If you want to stay here, you need to contribute." Emily looked like she was about to explode, but she held her tongue. Arthur just looked defeated. "Fine," Emily said through gritted teeth. "But don't think this is over." I turned and walked out of the room, my heart pounding. As I stepped outside, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. I had stood my ground, and I wasn't going to let them push me around anymore. Later that night, as Thomas and I sat on the porch of my new apartment, I couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. "We did it," I said, leaning against him. "Yes, we did," he replied, wrapping his arm around me. "But I have a feeling this is far from over." I nodded, knowing he was right. Emily and Arthur were not going to give up easily, and I needed to be prepared for whatever came next. As we sat there in the quiet of the night, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of a much bigger battle. But with Thomas by my side, I knew I could face anything. I was just finishing up a batch of cupcakes when my phone rang. It was Mom, and her voice sounded strained. "Erica, can you come over? We need to talk," she said, her words clipped. "Of course, Mom. I'll be there soon," I replied, wiping my hands on my apron. When I arrived at the house, the atmosphere was tense. Emily and Arthur were sitting stiffly on the couch, and my parents looked unusually serious. Thomas had come with me, sensing that this was going to be another difficult evening. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. Dad cleared his throat. "We've been talking, and Emily and Arthur have proposed an arrangement." I frowned. "What kind of arrangement?" Emily leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with a mix of desperation and determination. "We want to stay in the apartment, but we need help with the bills. We were thinking you could contribute, considering you have a successful business." I felt my blood boil. You want me to pay for you to live here? After you forced me out. It's only fair, Erica, Arthur chimed in. We're all family, and we need to support each other. I turned to my parents. And you agree with this? Mom looked pained. We just want to keep the peace, Erica. We're not getting any younger, and the stress is too much. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my emotions in check. I understand, but this isn't right. They need to take responsibility for their own actions. Emily's face turned red. You think you're so perfect, don't you? Just because you run a cake shop doesn't mean you know everything. Thomas stepped in, his voice calm but firm. This isn't about being perfect. It's about fairness. Erica has worked hard for what she has, and she shouldn't have to pay for your mistakes. Emily glared at him. You have no idea what we've been through. Then tell us, I said, my voice rising. What exactly have you been through? Emily hesitated, then finally spoke. We have gambling debts. Arthur got into some trouble, and we lost a lot of money. We're trying to pay it back, but it's not easy. I felt a pang of pity, but it was quickly overshadowed by anger. And you thought the solution was to push me out and make me pay for your mistakes? We didn't have a choice, Arthur said, his voice cracking. We were desperate. I turned to my parents. This is why you need to let them handle their own problems. Bailing them out won't teach them anything. Dad sighed. You're right, Erica. But we can't just turn our backs on them. I looked at Emily and Arthur, seeing the fear and desperation in their eyes. Despite everything, they were still my family. But I couldn't let them take advantage of me. I'll make you a deal, I said, my voice steady. I'll help you with the bills for a few months, but only if you agree to get financial counseling and start paying your way. No more handouts. Emily's eyes widened. You'd do that? Yes, I replied. But you have to take responsibility and make changes. This can't go on forever. Arthur nodded slowly. We agree. We'll do whatever it takes. I turned to my parents. This is the only way I'll help. They need to learn from this. Mom looked relieved. Thank you, Erica. We just want everyone to be okay. Later that night, as Thomas and I sat on the porch, I felt a mix of exhaustion and resolve. Do you think I did the right thing? I asked him. You did what you had to do, he said, squeezing my hand. It's not easy, but sometimes tough love is the best way to help. I nodded, knowing he was right. This was just another step in a long journey, but I was determined to see it through. For my parents, for Emily and Arthur, and for myself. As the night grew darker, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over. But with Thomas by my side, I knew I could face whatever came next. The following weeks were a blur of work and worry. I juggled managing my cake shop with keeping an eye on Emily and Arthur's progress. They had reluctantly agreed to attend financial counseling, and I hoped it would make a difference. But deep down, I knew this was only a temporary fix. One evening, as I was closing up the shop, Thomas walked in, his expression serious. Erica, we need to talk. I wiped my hands on a towel and joined him at a table. What's wrong? He took a deep breath. I've been doing some digging. I found out that Arthur's gambling debts are worse than we thought. He's been borrowing money from some very dangerous people. I felt a chill run down my spine. How bad is it? Thomas hesitated. Bad enough that they've started making threats. If he doesn't pay up soon, things could get ugly. My mind raced. We need to tell Mom and Dad. They have to know the full extent of this. Thomas nodded. I agree. But we also need to think about our own safety. If these people come looking for Arthur, they might come here too. I felt a surge of anger and fear. This is all so messed up. How could they let it get this far? We'll figure it out, Thomas said, squeezing my hand. But we need to act fast. That night, we went to my parents' house. Emily and Arthur were out, which gave us the perfect opportunity to talk to Mom and Dad alone. Mom, Dad, we need to tell you something. I began, my voice shaking slightly. They looked at me with concern. What is it, Erica? Mom asked. I took a deep breath. Arthur's gambling debts are much worse than we thought. He's been borrowing money from dangerous people, and they're making threats. Dad's face turned pale. Threats? What kind of threats? Serious ones, Thomas said. If Arthur doesn't pay up, they could come after him, and anyone close to him. Mom looked like she was about to cry. Oh my God! What are we going to do? We need to get them out of here, I said firmly. It's not safe for any of us if they stay. Dad nodded slowly. You're right. We can't risk it. Just then the front door opened, and Emily and Arthur walked in. They stopped short when they saw the looks on our faces. What's going on? Emily asked, her eyes narrowing. We know about the threats, Emily, I said, standing up. Arthur's debts are putting all of us in danger. Arthur's face turned red. Who told you that? It doesn't matter, Thomas said. What matters is that you need to leave. Now. Emily looked at me, her eyes filled with a mix of anger and fear. You can't just kick us out. We don't have a choice, I said, my voice firm. This is about our safety. Arthur looked desperate. Where are we supposed to go? I don't know, I replied. But you can't stay here. Emily's face crumpled, and she started to cry. This is all your fault, Arthur. You promised me everything would be okay. Arthur looked defeated. I'm sorry, Emily. I never wanted this to happen. Mom stepped forward, her voice trembling. We'll help you find somewhere to stay, but you need to leave tonight. Emily looked at me, her eyes pleading. Please, Erica, don't do this. I felt a pang of guilt, but I knew I had to stand my ground. I'm sorry, Emily. This is for everyone's safety. As they gathered their things and left, I felt a mix of relief and sorrow. This was not how I wanted things to be, but it was necessary. Later that night, as Thomas and I sat on the porch, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. Did we do the right thing? I asked him. He nodded. Yes, we did. But this isn't over. We need to stay vigilant. I looked out at the darkened street, feeling a sense of foreboding. This crisis had revealed just how deep the issues ran, and I knew we had a long road ahead. But with Thomas by my side, I felt ready to face whatever came next. The next morning, I woke to a flurry of missed calls and frantic messages from Emily. My heart sank as I read them, each one more desperate than the last. Erica, please call me. It's urgent. Arthur's gone missing. I don't know what to do. Please, Erica. I'm scared. I jumped out of bed and quickly dialed her number. She picked up on the first ring, her voice trembling. Erica, thank God. I don't know where Arthur is. He left last night and hasn't come back. Calm down, Emily. Where did he go? I asked, trying to keep my own fear at bay. He said he was going to meet someone about the debts. But he didn't say who, she sobbed. I felt a chill run down my spine. Stay where you are. Thomas and I will be there soon. I quickly explained the situation to Thomas, and we rushed over to Emily's temporary apartment. When we arrived, she looked like a wreck, eyes puffy from crying, hair disheveled. It was a stark contrast to the composed, confident sister I knew. We need to find him, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Do you have any idea who he might have met? Thomas asked, his tone urgent. Emily shook her head. No, he wouldn't tell me. He just said he needed to fix things. I took a deep breath, trying to think clearly. We need to check his usual spots. Maybe he went to one of the places he frequented for gambling. Emily nodded and we split up, Thomas and I taking one car, Emily taking another. We drove to every casino and shady bar Arthur had ever mentioned, asking if anyone had seen him. Hours passed with no luck, and my anxiety grew with each passing minute. Finally, as the sun began to set, Thomas got a call. He listened intently, then hung up, his face grim. That was one of my contacts. Arthur was seen at a warehouse on the outskirts of town. It's known for illegal gambling. We sped to the location, my heart pounding in my chest. When we arrived, the warehouse looked abandoned, but there were a few cars parked outside. We cautiously approached, and I could hear voices coming from inside. Stay back, Thomas whispered, pulling me behind a stack of crates. Let me check it out first. He crept forward, peeking through a crack in the door. After a moment, He motioned for me to follow. Inside, we saw Arthur, looking terrified and cornered by a group of men. One of them, a burly guy with a scar across his face, was yelling at him. "You think you can just walk away from your debts?" The man snarled. "You owe us and we want our money." Arthur was shaking. I'll get it. I promise. Just give me more time." The man laughed, a cruel sound that sent shivers down my spine. "Time's up, Arthur. You either pay up, or we take it out of your hide." I couldn't stay hidden any longer. "Stop!" I shouted, stepping into the open. The men turned to look at me, surprise and annoyance on their faces. "Who the hell are you?" the burly man demanded. "I'm his sister-in-law," I said, my voice steady despite the fear coursing through me. "And I'm here to make sure he pays his debts." The man raised an eyebrow. "Is that so? And how do you plan to do that?" Thomas stepped forward, his presence commanding. "We'll pay what he owes, but you let him go. No harm comes to him." The man looked us over, then nodded slowly. "Fine. But he owes us $50,000. You have that kind of money?" I felt a sinking feeling. We didn't have that kind of money on hand, but we had to do something. "Give us a week," I said, my mind racing. "We'll get the money." The man considered it, then nodded. "1 week. If you don't have the money by then, Arthur pays with his life." "Understood. Understood," I said, my voice firm. We helped Arthur to his feet and led him out of the warehouse. As we drove back, the weight of the situation settled on me. We had 1 week to come up with $50,000, or Arthur's life was in danger. Back at the apartment, Emily was waiting, her face a mask of worry. When she saw Arthur, she ran to him, tears streaming down her face. "Thank God you're safe." Arthur looked at me, his eyes filled with gratitude and shame. "I'm so sorry, Erica. I never meant for this to happen." "We'll figure it out," I said, my voice determined. "But you need to stay out of trouble. No more gambling. Promise me." "I promise," he said, his voice breaking. As Thomas and I left, I felt the weight of the world on my shoulders. We had 1 week to save Arthur, and I had no idea how we were going to do it. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let my family down. Not now, not ever. The next few days were a blur of frantic activity. Thomas and I worked tirelessly to come up with the $50,000. I reached out to every contact I had, hoping someone could help. Thomas even considered selling some of his prized art pieces, but it wouldn't be enough. The deadline loomed over us like a dark cloud. One evening, as I was closing up the cake shop, my phone rang. It was Mom. "Erica, we need to talk," she said, her voice strained. I could tell something was wrong. "What is it, Mom?" "Your father and I have decided to sell the house," she said, her voice breaking. "We can't keep living like this and we need the money." I felt a pang of guilt. "Mom, you don't have to do that. We'll find another way." "We've already made up our minds," she said firmly. "It's the only way to help Emily and Arthur, and to make sure we're all safe." I hung up, feeling a mix of relief and sorrow. Selling the house was a drastic measure, but it would solve the immediate crisis. However, it also meant losing the place where so many memories were made. When I arrived home, Thomas was waiting for me. "How did it go?" he asked. "They're selling the house," I said, my voice heavy with emotion. "It's the only way to get the money in time." Thomas nodded, his face somber. "It's a tough decision, but it might be the only option." The next morning, we met with a real estate agent to start the process. The house was put on the market, and we hoped for a quick sale. The waiting was agonizing, each day feeling like an eternity. Finally, a buyer came forward, and the sale went through. We had the money, but the cost was high. Our family home, the place where I had grown up, was no longer ours. With the money in hand, we arranged to meet the men at the warehouse. The tension was palpable as we approached, the weight of the situation pressing down on us. Inside, the burly man with the scar was waiting, a smug look on his face. "You got the money?" he asked. Thomas handed over the briefcase. "It's all there. Now let Arthur go." The man opened the briefcase, counting the money with a satisfied grin. "Looks like we're done here," he said, nodding to his men. Arthur was released, looking pale and shaken. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice barely audible. As we left the warehouse, I felt a mix of relief and exhaustion. The immediate crisis was over, but the damage was done. Our family was fractured, and it would take time to heal. Back at the apartment, Emily hugged Arthur tightly, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "I never wanted any of this to happen." Arthur looked at her, his eyes filled with regret. "Neither did I. But we need to move forward and make things right." I nodded, feeling a sense of resolve. "We will. But it's going to take time and effort. We need to rebuild, not just our finances, but our relationships too." The next few days were spent packing up the family home, a bittersweet task filled with memories. As I boxed up old photos and mementos, I couldn't help but feel a sense of loss. But I also felt a glimmer of hope. This was a new beginning, a chance to start fresh. One evening, as we were finishing up, Thomas took my hand. "I have something to ask you," he said, his eyes serious. I looked at him, my heart pounding. "What is it?" He took a deep breath. "Erica, will you marry me?" I felt a surge of emotion, tears filling my eyes. "Yes, Thomas. Yes, I will." As we hugged, I felt a sense of peace. Despite everything we had been through, we had each other. And that was enough. The next morning, we gathered as a family, ready to move forward. The road ahead would be challenging, but we were determined to face it together. As we walked away from the house for the last time, I felt a sense of closure. This was the end of one chapter, but the beginning of another. With Thomas by my side and my family working to rebuild, I knew we could overcome anything. The future was uncertain, but it was also filled with possibility. And that was something worth fighting for. The day of reckoning arrived, and I found myself standing outside Emily's office building. I had called ahead and knew she was in a meeting, but I couldn't wait any longer. I needed to confront her and put an end to this once and for all. With a deep breath, I walked into the lobby and approached the receptionist. "I'm here to see Emily Johnson," I said, my voice steady. The receptionist gave me a wary look. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but it's urgent," I replied. "I'm her sister." She hesitated, then picked up the phone and dialed. After a brief conversation, she nodded. "You can go up. She's in conference room B." I made my way to the conference room, my heart pounding. When I opened the door, Emily looked up, her eyes widening in surprise. "Erica, what are you doing here?" she asked, her voice tense. "We need to talk," I said, stepping inside and closing the door behind me. Emily glanced at her colleagues, then back at me. "Can it wait? I'm in the middle of a meeting." "No, it can't," I said firmly. "This is important." She sighed and excused herself, leading me to a nearby office. "What's so urgent?" "I need the money you owe me," I said, my voice unwavering. "You promised to repay the rent and bills, and I need it now." Emily's face paled. "Erica, I don't have that kind of money right now. You have to find it," I insisted. "You and Arthur need to take responsibility for your actions." Emily's eyes filled with tears. "I know we messed up, but we're trying to fix things. Please give us more time." I took a deep breath, softening slightly. "Emily, I understand you're struggling, but you can't keep running away from your problems. It's time to face them head-on." She nodded, wiping her eyes. "You're right. I'll find a way to get the money. I promise." "Good," I said, feeling a sense of relief. "And remember, we're family. We need to support each other. But that means being honest and taking responsibility." Emily looked at me, her expression filled with gratitude and remorse. "Thank you, Erica. I don't deserve your help, but I appreciate it." As I left the office, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. This was a step towards healing for both of us. A few weeks later, Thomas and I stood in front of a small chapel, surrounded by our closest friends and family. The sun was shining, and the air was filled with the scent of blooming flowers. It was the perfect day for a wedding. As I walked down the aisle, I saw my parents beaming with pride. Emily and Arthur were there too, looking happier and more relaxed than I had seen them in a long time. They had started attending financial counseling regularly and were making progress in paying off their debts. When I reached Thomas, he took my hand, his eyes filled with love and admiration. "You look beautiful," he whispered. "Thank you," I replied, my heart swelling with happiness. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt, and as we exchanged vows, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. This was the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with love, support, and hope. After the ceremony, we gathered for a small reception. As I looked around at the smiling faces of my family and friends, I realized how far we had come. We had faced countless challenges, but we had emerged stronger and closer than ever. Emily approached me, a shy smile on her face. "Congratulations, Erica. I'm so happy for you." "Thank you, Emily," I said, pulling her into a hug. "And thank you for working so hard to make things right." She nodded, tears in her eyes. "I couldn't have done it without you. You've always been the strong one." I smiled, feeling a sense of pride and accomplishment. We're all strong in our own ways, and together we can overcome anything. As the evening drew to a close, Thomas and I stood on the porch, looking out at the twinkling lights and listening to the laughter of our loved ones. "We did it," I said, leaning against him. "Yes, we did," he replied, wrapping his arm around me. "And this is just the beginning." I looked up at him, feeling a sense of contentment and excitement for the future. I couldn't agree more. With Thomas by my side and my family working towards a brighter future, I knew that we could face whatever challenges came our way. The road ahead might be uncertain, but it was also filled with endless possibilities. And that was something worth celebrating.